without further ado, I think I would like to hand over to our first speaker, um, Alina, and she will tell us a little bit more about how turning raw material risks into opportunities um, in, for Germany and Australia.
So, hello everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here today to talk about a topic that couldn't be more, just a second, couldn't be more current and honestly couldn't be more urgent. When you open a newspaper in Germany these days, you keep reading the same headlines over and over again. Dependence on China, industry in panic, supply chain collapsing, raw materials running out. And whether it's about electromobility, semiconductors, renewable energy, or even defense, the underlying problem is always the same. We are running out of metals that keep our modern world alive. The ironic thing is, we created this situation ourselves out of convenience, out of cost pressure, and perhaps even a bit out of naivety. And today, the Western world is waking up to a very hard truth. We are strategically dependent. Or to put it more bluntly, we are blackmailable in terms of raw materials. And that's exactly why I'm here today. My name is Alina Pieper. I am an entrepreneur specializing in tax-free tangible asset investments, and I work very closely with Noble Elements, one of the largest importers of rare earths and technology metals in the DACH region. Together, we help private investors and institutions secure physical access to these critical resources. I'm not the one operating the storage sites, but I do make sure my clients are the ones helping to fill them. Together with our investors, we are creating strategic reserves, a buffer for European industry. Physically stored, secured, transparently managed, and at the same time, one of the strongest performing asset classes of our time. Because when the industry panics, it simply means one thing. Those who own the metals hold the power. And those who secure them early profit twice, economically and strategically. But how did we get here? How did the most advanced economies in the world end up so vulnerable? The answer is very simple and uncomfortable. We outsourced responsibility and know-how. We wanted cheap supply chains, but no mines in our own backyard. So we sent the dirty work somewhere else. It was convenient, it was comfortable, it was profitable, but it was very short-sighted and, in my opinion, a huge mistake. China thought in decades. It always did. And we thought in election cycles, as we always did. And now we are paying the price. Yeah. Sorry. Rare earth and technology metals are the invisible foundation of our modern civilization. They are the backbone of everything, from green energy to artificial intelligence, from digital communication to national security. The era in which oil and gas powered the planet is over. The age of metal has begun. Without these elements, no airplane would fly, no computer would compute, no wind turbine would spin, no electric vehicle would move, and no MRI would operate. They are finite, they are scarce, and geopolitically charged. And yet, The entire world, the entire modern world depends on them. Let's make this a little bit more tangible. Every single one of you has already touched one of these metals today. When you got into your car this morning, whether it's electric or combustion, you were surrounded by critical raw materials. You turned the key or pressed the start button, you switched on the radio, adjusted the navigation, maybe charged your phone on the way, and every single action depended on them, raw materials. The reality is, an average car contains up to 18 critical metals, from copper and cobalt to neodymium and dysprosium. And most of them are produced in tiny global quantities. And your phone? Yeah, you've all touched indium today. The metal that makes your touch screen work. Without it, your display would stay dark. And even the supermarket door, which opens automatically, that's rare earth magnets at work. We don't see these materials, but we use them every second of our lives. Yeah, not when you're sleeping, but yeah. And that's what makes them so valuable. Now let the numbers tell the rest. Let's take a look at the gold production. Around 3,300 tons per year. That sounds small, right? Then take a look at indium. It's right here. Only a few hundred tons mined and produced annually. And most of these 18 metals in your car, below 2,000 tons a year worldwide. That's not statistic. That's scarcity in its purest form. These metals power every megatrend: electromobility, AI, renewable energy, defense, space, medicine, and we're only at the beginning. Robotization, artificial intelligence, human robotics, these fields will multiply global demand exponentially. By 2040, material demand for digitalization and AI will rise sevenfold. By 2050, one robot for every human being. This isn't sci-fi anymore. It's just 25 years away. Boston Dynamics even plans to mass produce humanoid robots by 2029. And BMW is building its first fully automated 24/7 factory. No human workers needed. The demand for rare earth magnets is exploding, and we are not just in a raw material supercycle, we are at the start of a technology supercycle. Even Ursula von der Leyen said in 2022, lithium and rare earth will soon be more important than oil and gas. And she's right. This isn't about energy anymore. It's about sovereignty. China now dominates almost the entire refining process of rare earth. For heavy metals like dysprosium oxide, its share is 99%. We didn't just outsource our production, we outsourced our knowledge. We built a dependency so deep that we can barely compete. It's like baby China grew up and we all missed its childhood. So 94% of gallium and germanium and almost all heavy rare earths come from one country. That's not a supply chain anymore. That's a power chain. As Andreas Kroll put it, panic is an appropriate reaction. He said this 2 years ago. And I think he was right. Because what we've seen since then is unbelievable. The export restriction triggered by the trade dispute between China and the US have catapulted raw material prices to new heights in no time. Yttrium, for example, up 1,500%. Gallium plus 70%. Dysprosium oxide up more than 150% in 10 months. For investors, that means record returns. Yeah, nice. I'm always happy when I look at my depot. But for industries, it means production halts. And while China dictates the prices, Europe still invests only 2% of the global exploration budget. 2%. We talk about independence, but with numbers like that, it's still just talk. And these numbers don't lie. And they made us realize we needed a way to track them. So we created the NEX, the Noble Elements Index, to see in real time how raw materials outperform everything else. In 2020, we launched it, and it tracks key materials like hafnium, gallium, germanium, indium, rhenium, and neodymium oxide, and compares their performance to the DAX, the little blue line you can see here, and the S&P 500, the purple line, and the next is obviously the green line. Since then, since 2020, these metals have outperformed every major asset class, plus 270% performance since 2020. What we are seeing here is more than a rally. It's the beginning of a new raw material supercycle, one that fuels the next technology supercycle. Because every robot, every electric car, every AI system, they all rely on the same finite elements. But let's be clear, our storage initiative is only a small step in the right direction. It doesn't solve the global supply problem, not at all. But it helps to create bridges between private capital, industry, and supply chains. So for private investors, it means tax-free growth and tangible value. And for industry, it offers access to secured resources. And for Europe, it shows what cooperation can achieve when everyone contributes a part. And when we take a look at the bigger picture, we are still standing at the very beginning of a much larger development. Historically, every economic downturn has triggered a new upswing in commodities. The oil crisis, the dot-com crash, the financial crisis, and now the pandemic. And the next is showing exactly the same setup today. We are at the beginning of the next commodity supercycle. Or to quote Andreas Pietsch, he's a co-founder of Noble Elements, specialized raw material investments could achieve an outperformance potential of 700 to 900% over the next decade. So the coming decade won't just be about price movements, it will be about who builds the right partnerships to secure long-term access to critical elements. Oh, sorry. And it's so obvious that Europe can't do this alone. We need strategic partnerships with producing nations, with technology leaders, and with private investors who think long term. Because only by building these bridges can we ensure that tomorrow's innovations do not depend on yesterday's supply chains. And every supercycle in history has shown one thing. When resources become the foundation of power, economics and geopolitics are no longer separate. And that's exactly where we are right now. China will not help NATO to rearm, and the new export controls prove that. The last so-called deal between the US and China wasn't really a solution, it was a pause. China needed soybeans, the West needed rare earths. We called it compromise. But in reality, it was a discount on goods that had already gone up 15%. And while we were still negotiating, China was already preparing One China, military exercises near Taiwan, rocket launches, coal expansions. In fact, China is currently building 2 new coal power plants every week. And even social credit blood donations. It sounds dystopian, but it's real. And the situation around Taiwan makes one thing painfully clear. Europe cannot rely on others to secure its future. Every conflict, every new export restriction shows us the same thing. Control over critical materials means control over industrial and technological progress. And through these export restrictions, China has shown that it is no longer a reliable partner, not for the West, and certainly not for Europe's industrial future. And that realization has shaken the West. We are in a state of panic. Everyone is scrambling for alternatives, for new suppliers, for new partnerships, trying to rebuild what was outsourced so long ago, supply security. We've seen how dependencies have grown, how control shifted, and how awareness often came way too late. At some point, we realized that silence was no longer an option. If we wanted change, we had to name the problem clearly. And that's why Andreas Kroll and Andreas Pietsch wrote The Cocaine of Industry. A title that sounds provocative, and it was meant to be, not to sensationalize, but to wake people up. Unfortunately, it's only available in German for now, but who knows? Maybe we'll work on that next. They didn't write it to provoke, but to make visible what too many ignored for too long. Because rare earth and technology metals have become dangerously addictive. They've powered our progress, but they've also made us very dependent. And for decades, China has acted as the world's silent dealer, supplying what we demanded until dependence turned into control. We wanted to change that. So we started by doing what we could, building strategic storage for the metals that keep our industries alive. It's not a solution, the solution, but it is a start, because no single project can restore balance alone, I think. And what we need now are strong partnerships with countries like Australia that are already showing the courage to act. Arafura Rare Earths is one of those projects, a model that unites everything we need: mining, refining, and accountability in one transparent chain. Only together we can turn control back into collaboration and dependence back into sovereignty. And that's what this is really all about: turning panic into purpose and purpose into power. Because in times of crisis, people don't freeze, they become creative, they become inventive and brave. I honestly would have loved to spend more time talking about raw materials, because there's so much happening and it's one of the most fascinating topics of our time. But if today gave you even a glimpse of how big this really is, then I've already reached my goal. And if you'd like to be part of it, if you want to help fill the strategic storage and that keeps our industries alive, and maybe even seize one of the greatest investment opportunities of our time, feel free to reach out. You can call me or simply send me an email. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this conversation.